Second edition of the college football playoff rankings was released Tuesday night, with reigning champs Georgia taking over the #1 spot after beating Tennessee this past weekend. Following the Dogs is Ohio State, Michigan, and then TCU. They bumped up to #4 with their perfect 9-0 record. Then Tennessee and Oregon coming in at 5-6. Now, JP, 7 is LSU, and I know you said yesterday if they were any higher you would freak out, so you don't have to freak out here today. But let's talk about the top 4 here. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think they got it right this time around. I was actually pretty satisfied. There's one team sitting there in the top 10 that I'm really questioning why they're there, and another team that's outside of the top 10. We'll get into that a little bit later, but Georgia obviously emphatic in their win against Tennessee. I said it yesterday. I'll say it again today. This was not as close as what the score would indicate. That game would have been blown out, especially had the weather not come in the second half. So definitely like what they did there. Ohio State, their resume was enhanced by the way that Notre Dame is playing right now. Notre Dame's a team that sneaks into the CFP top 25, I believe, at number 20. And so that's probably why they're holding on to that #2 spot. And I mentioned that I believed that Michigan had a strong case to be the #2 team. I would have had them at #2 based off of the way that they are playing right now compared to the way Ohio State's played in the last couple weeks. But you see Michigan slotting in there at #3. Their biggest obstacle has been the fact that their non-conference schedule was very, very weak. They did not get any help from the way that they played early in the season. Then TCU at #4. The right place for them to be, but the question is, can they survive the remainder of their schedule? They've got Texas coming up this weekend. They're going to Texas to play that game. They got Baylor and Iowa State. It seems like there is an opportunity for them to stumble. This is a team that has shown that they like to make games interesting, but winning games is of value in college football, and that's exactly what they've done up to this point.
All right, well, let's get to today's poll. Who should be the #4 in the college football playoff rankings? And 33% are saying Tennessee. Now, JP, going into these rankings last night, a lot of people were questioning who should be in that #4 spot. Should it be Tennessee? Even, losing to a tough team like Georgia, but then you have TCU. I mean, they're undefeated right now in a tough conference in the Big 12. Do you think they're finally getting the respect that they deserve?
Yes, and the TCU thing for me, do they have some of the top-end wins like a Tennessee would have? They got wins over #7, #10, and #24 in the current CFP rankings. No, TCU doesn't have that, but they are undefeated. And to me, they're playing in a conference right now that I think is very strong in the middle. This is a conference where there's not going to be an easy out in terms of games. I mean, you look at the back of Tennessee's schedule. They have Missouri, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt. I mean, you could sleepwalk through those games and end up winning them. Maybe South Carolina gives you a little bit of trepidation, but I think the value of the fact that the Big 12 conference looks the way it does from top to bottom, specifically in the middle, has helped convince people that TCU, even getting behind in games, they were playing some tough teams in those games.
Well, I want to bring up a school that we haven't really referenced yet, and that's Oregon. They're right behind Tennessee at #6 here. I mean, out of those two teams, who do you think is more likely to sneak into that #4 spot?
It's interesting because Tennessee could finish 11-1 sitting on the outside of their conference championship game. They would have a very good resume up to that point. I mentioned the wins that they have, but now you're looking at an Oregon team. Their loss was early on to the same Georgia team. They've got a win over the #12 team in the current CFP rankings. They still got to play #25 Washington, #13 Utah. So they'd be able to rack up a couple of really good wins. In the way that they have played, Bo Nix has been the second best quarterback in college football, basically behind C.J. Stroud. Since that Georgia game, you can make a legitimate argument that that game was an aberration. If they were to play it again, it would be a much more closely contested game, and that Oregon, with their resume, would deserve a spot there in the top 4.